Mute your mic. All right. Today is Wednesday, November 9th. The time now is 1:05. And I'll do a quick roll call. Mr. Breeden, here. Here. Mr. Castle, here. Pierce, here. Mr. Mill, present. And Mr. Deary, present. Note that Mr. Larigo and Mr. Myers are absent. Okay. You all received the minutes from our last meeting on September 12th. Are there any questions or comments? There are none. I have a motion to approve the minutes. For now on the second. So all in favor? Aye. Aye. Abstentions? All right, we'll get right into it. So we've been doing a ton of work in DEP to get this ErieNet LDC effectively functional. So on October 16th or 17th, we issue RFPs for our accounting services and our legal services. Within the past week, the committee met, which comprised of myself, Dan Castle, Mark Cornell for the accounting services, and then that same team, minus Mark Cornell, plus County Attorney Jeremy Toth, to review the RFPs, score them, and effectively give our recommendation. So we went through the process, we met, we landed on Lumpkin and McCormick for accounting services and Harris Beach for legal services. If there are any questions about how we went about the procurement, the RFP process, the two respective firms, we can talk about it, we can discuss it now if not.
I'd say both the firms we recommended have extensive experience in Erie County, and I think that the continuity and the familiarity was one of the key things, both the accounting side and the legal side.
Yeah, I mean, one of the key things, like Dan just mentioned, was both of these are rooted in Buffalo. Lumsden McCormick, they're right down the street. Their headquarters are Harris Beach, staple in Buffalo and Erie County. So that was one of the driving factors. But I can say that the other two firms, accounting and legal respectively, were not so rooted in this area. That was a critical factor that we discussed. Mm-hmm. So, we want to be able to pick up the phone and call or go down to the office or have them come here. Mm-hmm. And then I think additionally, we're not trying to pay for extra costs for somebody to travel to this meeting, which we're having right now. So those are all important outside of the technical abilities of both that I think were significant.
Yeah, the travel cost was.
So if you go to your next B, banking services, because banking services are essentially nominal given the size of the account that we'll have, there's no cost to us essentially. So it doesn't require us to go through the same sort of procurement process. Nonetheless, I met with Bank on Buffalo, which is a local bank, M&T, which is a larger bank, and then Key Bank, another larger bank. So in your packet, you'll see the materials that they provided. Bank on Buffalo, M&T, and Key Bank, the information that they provided. You'll find it behind the resolutions that we have. So ultimately, after meeting with them, I realized that Bank on Buffalo is not necessarily a local bank. They have some, essentially a bank that was placed here in Buffalo, but I think their headquarters are in Pennsylvania or something like that, somewhere that's not Buffalo. Key Bank, less warm and fuzzy, didn't feel like they would be giving me the best service. We met on Zoom, which was kind of off-putting. M&T was very aggressive about meeting in person, coming to us. Josh Hine, who's their representative and who's their point person for governmental contracts, was extraordinarily knowledgeable from M&T, hands-on approach, familiar with them and a bunch of organizations that we work with in Erie County. So it was very comfortable to meet with him, follow back up with me. One of the key things that I talked about with each of the firms or each of the banks was, what are they doing in Erie County for things outside of banking, philanthropic efforts. A lot of what ErieNet will be is to support, our community and our citizenry. So I wanted to know about that. M&T Bank was far beyond each of the others. So it is my recommendation to the board to approve M&T Bank. Any questions or discussions about M&T or any other banks? So as far as the cost structure, like I mentioned before, because we will have the funds in the bank, upwards of $30 million, we don't pay for wire transfers. We don't pay for ACHs or anything like that. Yeah. It's really just complimentary services because you got it. Not to mention the relationship with the county. That's also a benefit to us as well. Benefit to your C, our insurance, we've decided that Lawley is our group that we'll go with. Also, similar to the banking, we don't have to procure formally because Erie County already has a relationship with Lawley, and therefore we fall under the procurement of the county, much in the same way that the county falls under the state. So we're moving forward with the application. And just for formality's sake, we also have a resolution in our set of resolutions that will allow the board to allow for our general liability insurance. All right. Any questions before we move on?
Thomas, what I gave you for that insurance application, is that what's going to Lawley?
Yes.
Right. Did you have enough information for what we were able to provide you?
So my intention was to fill out the application, come here today to get the blessing of the board, so everything's on the up and up, and then we'll take the next step with Lawley to make sure everything is good, get the application.
Yeah, the only thing I noticed was I had a lot of questions about construction and what contractor, and obviously we don't have a construction contractor yet.
Right.
So
and they're aware of that. I made them aware. That's just standard application, but
we can give them projections.
Yeah. Sure. All right. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. Next, our executive director search. So, been working with the county to delineate how it will look for an executive director search via the county. And what we've realized is that it's probably best for ErieNet to go out on its own. So we'll have to do our own. We have a job description. We have to do our own search. So we'll use, the resources that are available in need, those type of traditional resources. What did come up is whether or not we would like to employ a headhunter. But my approach would be, let's see what we get first. Let's tap our networks, and then if we need to pay, we'll have that conversation at a later date. But that's the status as it is. Okay. Question?
Sounds good.
Next, our treasurer here, Mark Purnell, if you want to give a quick ABO update.
I've been in contact with the authorities' budget office, provided them with all of the enacting paperwork for ErieNet LDC, and we are officially recognized now as an authority under the jurisdiction of the ABO, with all of the responsibilities that come with that regarding reporting and all of that. So we're in a good place. We're actually showing up under all of the various searches that can be done under the Paris system for various reports and things of that nature already. So we're completely in there now. We just need to begin, presenting the requisite materials.
Thanks, Mr. Cornell. And moving on, we'll move to Matt Kreider, who will give us an update from the ECC technology perspective. If you don't already have it, report here. It's on you.
Yeah. Does everybody have, I could throw it up on the, you have a copy. But things are going well with the design effort. All the routes north of Route 20, which actually I am going to share my screen because I can show you a picture of the map. This is more interesting. Share. All right, so here we are, Erie County, and the green is what we have field verified. So it's probably 80% of the entire network. Of the 400 miles, we probably have more than 300 verified. And what by verify, I mean we've driven it, we've looked at the pole lines, and it's a valid route to take. We were able to drive some alternate routes that looked like maybe had less resistance, easier construction, less costly construction, but still maintain the right corridors to reach potential customers. So we've made some adjustments, but all the anchor institutes that we had in the business plan that required connectivity still have connectivity. Where the backbone's well positioned for if and when the city of Buffalo comes on board, if and when UB comes on board. So to kind of give you an example, this is what's been verified. This is the entire network with the pink. You can see the green overlays most of it. What hasn't been verified is what Mac Zukoff, our design construction manager, calls south of US 20, which is south of Orchard Park, basically down through here, down into Springville, out to Akron. And so far, we're building fewer fiber miles than we had in the business plan. Mm-hmm. So we're going to basically, when we finish this route verification, which we think we'll be through with it by the end of this week, we had some excellent weather for that sort of thing. And so then we'll be at a point where Andy and I can recalculate all the cost models. And we can give you an update at that point as to, I think we'll have either a little bit more contingency to work with, or maybe we could talk about how we close off some of these gaps and bring off some of the architecture and pick up, I don't know, is it Marilla out here somewhere? Or what have you.
Yeah, that one's the Marilla close there.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's all going really well. And, Mac, if you recall, Mac, we recruited from Armstrong, just came off building 2,000 miles through the Southern Tier. He's very bullish. He's a challenge to keep up with. So he's impressed that we've been able to make this much progress in 2 months.
So building fewer miles, would it make sense to close the loop there to the southeast? I think it's from East Aurora, Holland.
Here,
assuming it's down the 16 corridor, or is that 240?
That's where we're talking about.
Yeah.
It will, and something I think I sent an email out to some of you. We need to revisit the 911 public safety folks, because I believe there's a New York State interoperable grant that's coming up. They need to submit their applications. And back in the business planning, we talked about submitting requests for primary and secondary network connections. And so, we don't want to leave any money on the table. If we can put that through, that I think would go a long ways also in finding some funding sources to what we had called in the business plan phase 2.
Right.
Perhaps, if we are successful with some of this, we could get more of that done with the initial build.
Right. So is this the time to mention our conversation with Connect All, or do you want to talk about that? Is that another item?
Yeah, you want
I mean, I don't want to take away from your update to talk about that, but when we get to the funding piece, maybe we can.
Well, I mean, it fits into ancillary funding now, so if you want to mention it.
So, you know, we have had conversations with Connect All about their interest in what's going on. We had a call with three or four of them last week, and they're very interested to know of the progress we've made. They I'm certainly led to believe that they have funding. They're going to, you know, look into the status of their, look at our business plan, look what we've done, and they're going to come back with potential funding sources and the avenue and the path to get those sources and when the application dates are and so forth. But it sounded like they could be in a position to provide funding for expanding the phase 1 into phase 2, or funding to accelerate that final mile piece once we get the middle mile. Is that the takeaway?
Yeah, I'm under the impression that we are ahead of the game, so to speak, that the state is somewhat still getting up to speed relative to where we are. And I think much of what we do now may be a blueprint for a lot of other communities. But I think at the same time, they have access to some funding that we may be able to tap into, at least retroactively. That we continue to keep the lines of communication open.
Yeah. They were going to come back and with more specificity over what their programs are, which would be eligible for what we're looking at over the next couple of years. So we'll know more then.
Ask a couple questions about the map.
Sure.
So the pink is proposed but not confirmed.
Well,
route, is that
the pink is the entire route. The green,
Which business plan?
which
from the business plan?
the green which overrides it, is what has been verified. So you can see we've had a little bit, you know, we were going to go this way and down and over here, and we found an easier way just to come out here. We needed a spur out to here. So really all of this has been verified.
Okay.
And it's this southwestern or southeastern side, which we're driving, you know, as we speak.
Right. So if you find a problem, whatever problem might be, then you look for an alternate route or something
That's right.
Okay.
We
And what,
like to avoid railroad crossings.
okay, I was just going to ask, what's a problem? What's considered a problem?
Anytime you have to go underground.
Okay.
Grand Island is a challenge because we have to get across the river. And we did get Holly, my Make Ready coordinator, called 811 Dig Safe and asked to identify all the fiber crossings in Grand Island, which is all public information. Sure. So we're getting that, but essentially what 811 told us is that Adesta has been hired by the Thruway Authority to manage all of the conduit and duct on the bridge. And it's Adesta that acts as their commercial operator.
It all goes over the bridge then?
Right.
There's nothing through the water?
I wouldn't say there isn't anything that goes through the water, but anything that the Thruway can control.
And on that, I think it was about a week. It was the last week of October. I reached out to Matt Lackfield, who's the local rep for New York State Thruway. Mm-hmm. His contact was off that week in Albany, but he fired back a couple questions, which just asking how the fiber would get to the bridge and off of that South Grand Island Bridge. I told him we didn't need the north, but it would all be aerial and then coming off.
It'd be nice to come on one of the bridges and come back on the alternate bridge.
Right, but the both south bridges, but we didn't need anything for the north going into Niagara County, correct?
Right. Yeah. No, not maybe in the future. If we ever go out to Niagara.
But it looks like we're going up to that industrial park.
That industrial park.
A bit to north. Yeah.
What are the two southernmost points?
Down here?
Yeah.
Wanda and Springville?
Yeah. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
For some reason it's not.
Okay.
And then you can go there, and then to the left would be Wanda.
How close are we getting to the tunnel with the nation in the north corner? Because they had expressed some interest, but
I looked at that.
We're going through their slow process of developing a relationship.
I think we're in this area.
Yeah. extreme northeast corner of the county.
Yeah,
Just hold on.
which is up through here.
93 would be the major route would be east of that. But
Yeah, and I don't know how, I mean, our charter is within Erie County. If the tribal organization, if the,
straddles ours. It's like the downtown Cedar.
but what would be interesting is if they were to connect to our backbone, and that would bring them back to downtown Buffalo.
Right, exactly.
You know what's right there, and I don't know, like butts up the nation butts right up to Akron High School
Oh,
in the village of Akron.
okay. I didn't realize it came down that far.
Yes. And once you pass the high school, it's on the right hand side. You get the
So it would be as simple as connecting into that high school if they wanted to in the future.
possibly. If that high school is on there, right? It should be.
That should be on there, right? Don't we have the high schools on here?
Yes, we have them plotted. We are still working out a program with the school districts to see. Basically, we have to just quote what we think these connections are going to be for the schools.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have to compare that to bids that they get in from everyone else and make an E-rate determination.
Right. We're the same.
Bloomingdale or John Street. Road there.
There's a tremendous amount of federal money available for reservations.
Right. Yeah.
So I guess in terms of where we're laying our backbone, how close it is to some of these high schools, for example, may determine what their cost is. So if we're looking at routing, are we taking into consideration where these high schools are?
Because remember, our initial Winnie Rick meetings were relatively, I won't say cold, but again, they wanted the whole package, multi-county package.
Right.
We left it at the concept of intra-district networking so as to avoid having to have a server room in each building.
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
The new Winnie Rick guy, there's a new Erie One BOCES guy who seems to be more open on the previous team. I think that's one of Matt's meetings coming up is with those folks. So,
Good. So Matt, what is the contingency plan if we can't use the bridge on Grand Island? Is there a wireless option or something?
Well, there's always wireless, but that's my last resort. But there's a carrier that's just it took them almost 2 years to get on the island. That's First Light, and here they have something like 400 strands of fiber that they brought onto the island. So we may want to negotiate with First Light and say we'll IRU, 24 strands or whatever we think is needed. We would build ErieNet fiber on the island, but to get across the river, IRU back some from Finger Lakes. And that might be the smart play regardless, because it depends on how willing they are to cooperate with a potential competitor.
right.
And, how competitive would they price that for us versus what's it going to cost us to lease from the Thruway Authority 2 ducts on either bridge. Or we could build on the bridges if the Thruway Authority were allow us to. So that's got to get sorted out, and it's a priority for me to figure out. I'd like to know how we're going to get to the island by the end of the year.
But I think I said this quietly, but isn't there stuff through the river too?
There probably is.
I know there's a water line, there's gas lines, there's other
Fiber.
Yeah. I don't think so, because Grand Island has been a broadband island out there. There's some Verizon service and there's some Spectrum service out there. But Crown hasn't figured out. I mean, First Light is the first carrier that's figured.
I see. Okay. Which is an indication that whatever's running through the river is not what we need.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. But I don't know specifically what's in the river. So as far as my update, the Make Ready, that's how we work with all the utility companies to get access to the poles. That's going well. Grid and NYSEG turned over their entire pole GIS data, which expedited our mapping and route verification. That was a very useful resource that they provided. We have the agreements queued up for Verizon and Grid. Also, Springville and Akron have some electric co-ops that have poles that we'll want to access. So I think you have the agreements, Thomas. I think we're waiting on getting the insurance and bonding and the agreement signed. And when that agreement's signed, then we're also in a position to release our first 1,000 poles to Leidos. And Leidos is Grid's make-ready engineer that we have to contract. We could contract with 3 or 4, and we went for an RFQ out to them, and Leidos came back with preferential. They're looking at, we gave them a 200 pole sample to review for format and form to make sure it's what they're expecting, but they can't act on that until the Grid agreement is in place and we can sign the Leidos agreement and cut them a PO. So I don't know where we are with cutting sizable checks, but they'll be coming up between now and
then it becomes a matter of moving money into that bank.
Yeah.
This is the pre-authorization form. So we're given as long as cash flows not impacted on 11.
Yeah.
And I think we gave both office string heads up coming, so we'll plan around it.
Yeah, because Leidos, their proposal was based on a certain schedule that we were going to meet. We're doing at least 1,000 polls a month, and that first submission of polls it's ready now, and so we'd like to get that in. Within the next 2 weeks. Is that in the cards, or do we need to go back and ask for more time?
I think either way, 2 weeks would be tight. Just given
it's not that we'd have to send them a check; it's that we'd have to issue a PO, and then they would issue an invoice at some point, and then that becomes.
I think that should be okay.
Yeah, 2 weeks should be good. As long as we don't have to issue a check, it should be good.
Yeah. I mean, you're just moving around Thanksgiving, right? I mean, I guess get people to cut check that Friday.
It's just that they'll go move on to a different carrier. And they'll circle back to us, but we'll lose some ground.
Well, I would suggest, I recommend as soon as the resolution is approved back in today, someone call Alan and just say our target goal for the transfers, then back out any investments they have on the cash flow.
Right. And everything I said about Grid is true of Verizon. Grid owns the majority, is the custodian of the majority of the polls, but Verizon has some that are just Verizon polls. We'll need agreements with them as well, and they're queued up. So Holly will be pressing you.
How long does it take for Leidos to do 1,000 polls? Is that a month? You do 1,000 a month?
Yeah. And that's the idea is, we have something like, forget the number Mac told me, I think there's 9,000 Grid polls. There's some NYSEG in the central eastern part of the county, and then Springville and Akron, not too many, but they're their own animal. So
Leidos actually goes out to every one of those thousands of polls and looks at them. Yep. Interesting.
So it also means as we submit these polls, our network is going from fluid to jello, right? And so we can still make adjustments, but then we may have to resubmit poll applications or change out polls for a new route. So again, that's to keep harping on it, but that's why the sales and marketing effort, really for the major players, you really got to try to lock them down over the next few months.
We'll be I'll be circulating the RFP for operating and marketing sales piece of it early next week, so we can look out for that.
That's great. Talked about pathway and permitting. Grand Island being the challenge right now. We're also going to grid for a number of permits to get into the downtown duct system, and then infinitely less expensive for us to lease duct from grid than to tear up the streets and the sidewalks and build miles of it underneath. So that's our plan for the majority. We'll have to do some construction into buildings. It'll be somewhat inevitable, but even to the Rath building, there is grid available, but what we want to see is, are you already using some of that? We want to come in from a different direction, which brings me to our POP design.
I just have one more question on the pathways. Occurred to me when we're talking about the bridges over to Allen. There are other rivers and waterways, Buffalo River, other not that large, but substantial water bodies. Are we planning going over or under, or putting new conduit? If we need new conduit, is that over or under?
If we need conduit, if we got to bury it, then we got to go below.
That's a whole DEC permit for going under every navigable stream. And
right. That's why we want to go through existing duct.
Right. That's okay. So when you're routing, you're looking for those.
There are some creeks. Generally, there's pole crossings that we can access.
Yeah. I'm thinking more like the Buffalo River. And sooner or later, you're going to have to cross the Buffalo River. Just conduits all over the place, but just.
Right. And so we've already identified some of those challenges with railroad crossings, throughway crossings, I-190 crossings. I mean, there's a whole slew of these permits that need to be submitted sooner than later. POP design, because Mike had called me a couple weeks ago, and I'm not quite sure if I understand what you're doing on the 15th floor of the Rath building, right? There's an existing data center that you're renovating?
Yes, correct. We'll be doing asbestos abatement, which is the biggest issue, and redoing the room and securing a new room.
Right. And then you've identified the look of space, yes.
Right. We walked through it back when y'all came through the
6 by 30 or something like that. I forget what it was, but do you have an A&E firm that's doing the larger project for the abatement?
Yes.
Are you doing construction? Like, are you changing out the raised floors? Are you changing out?
Well, we planned on leaving
the units or
reorganize it because it'd have to be pulled out, abated because there's mastic on the tiles below and so forth, and then we would reinstall that to the raised flooring. And then,
because I would coordinate with them. And I'm going to put Bill Hayes. He's my senior electrical designer. To do that whole POP layout, but we're going to be dovetailing in with what you're doing around us.
Yeah. The biggest part will be the remediation, and then basically we'll have a blank slate to build up whatever we need.
Right.
So it'll be butted up against the current server room. So pulling wire, the chase, everything's going to be right there. It's
just we should be
3 walls. We
want to specify the same equipment to match with what you're doing in the larger room.
And we're doing another, Bill, I'm going to say you, Bill's team is doing the whole new UPS for the building.
Right.
Generation and so forth. So the cooling will match up to our existing cooling.
Right. So should we coordinate with Bill? Who should we talk with as we get into
doing those bi-weekly?
Yeah, we're doing bi-weekly meetings.
Maybe we just
or weekly, actually.
Weekly now.
We're doing weekly meetings.
End of the month.
Right.
Bella's doing the design for that. And we're adding a couple, I think it was 3 extra conduits from the basement.
Yeah.
So wherever you penetrate, right? Clean.
Great. Will Bella be doing the larger M&E work for
the server room itself?
Yeah.
We didn't anticipate that. That's what I thought you guys were designing that.
Well, we are for the POP, but aren't you doing more than just that POP area?
Well, we're doing more, but we're turning it into office space. So Bill's team would probably.
Yeah, I would just.
Right.
Once it's abated, like Mike said, it's clean. We can move walls, put up walls wherever we need at that.
Yeah. And we have Popley engineers.
Probably works with us on it.
Who's, in fact, we're doing some.
No, I don't talk to us.
We're working with.
Probably has a few of our other controls.
So they're our MBE engineer consultant, so we can get them involved. Absolutely. Well, for because we're IT guys, we don't get into wall and ceiling constructions and
Understood.
power panel. We figured we would need that, and that's why we have them on the team. So I think it would be good just to have a coordination meeting so we understand exactly what you're looking for from us.
I'll organize that for our next one. We'll just add.
Yeah, we'll add you on.
Yeah. When do you think that might be?
Friday, I think 11.
It won't this Friday, but
Well, it won't be this Friday because
Is either Veterans Day? Yeah.
yeah.
the 18th, then we'll add it to.
On 18, you do it at like 10 or 9 or 10 a.m.? Wrath, I'm assuming.
That's correct. On the 10th floor or 14th, excuse me.
Perfect. Thank you.
So if we send it over to you, Matt, you can get the right people in.
Yeah. Sales and marketing. We met. We haven't met again with UB. We've been in contact. They seem to be quiet. I don't know if they've implied they're in or if they're still kicking tires, but
I think they lost one of their peoples. That Steve gentleman, I can't think of Steve's.
right. Ron Tarnowski kind of is the acting network manager.
Yeah, they lost someone because he contacted me the other day and he was with a different company.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe that's the holdup. They had a turnover.
See if he likes that new company. Maybe he will be an executive director for it. Anything new with City of Buffalo?
So we met with Mike Finn, who is now at GBC, and he gave me contact. But he was going to get in touch with Daryl Springer because I'm trying to connect with him.
He's a CIO.
Yeah. So,
But is their job non-responsive to your emails, or?
Put a couple calls out, but then there was the last thing that we discussed was the letter that he's been into.
Sort of like the pricing.
Yeah.
He just wanted to take, we had given him like an email with a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
He wanted something with ErieNet letterhead.
Right.
That said, our budgetary quote for this is.
Yeah. Do we have letterhead?
We have a logo.
We have a logo? All right. Yeah.
We have a logo. And
we're halfway there.
Do you guys have a home yet? Do you have a PO address?
Can you just send that to me? Then I'll
Yeah.
just try to revive the thing. I think some got lost.
Yeah, I think you want to just put the logo on it.
Yeah.
You sign it as the LDC
Chair.
chair. Yeah.
We'll get that to you tomorrow. Good meeting with Greater Buffalo, Niagara Regional Transportation Council and NITEC. There's something like 1,400 total devices throughout Erie County, mostly video cameras, but also cameras that have monitoring equipment, sensors. Of those 1,400, 600 are DOT, which leaves about 800 that they're interested in. 600 are City of Buffalo territory, cameras on poles, buildings, and 200 sprinkled throughout the rest of the county. So about 800 devices that could potentially benefit from an ErieNet connection. There's a particular corridor that they mapped out for us, and they gave us a PowerPoint, and that identified, I don't know, maybe 40 poles for out in North Amherst, Tonawanda area by the university. And they're going after a U.S. DOT SMART grant which is due the 18th of this month, November. So one thing they had asked in support of that grant was, again, a letter from the LDC supporting their grant effort. They want to go for a grant to cover a study for the GBRNTC to utilize ErieNet. So, money for them to study that. And then, we can coordinate with them and give them mapping and pricing to be used then in a subsequent grant to get some substantial money to help pay for their build. So that's in play. Looks like a pretty good opportunity for picking up a pretty good subscriber base. I want to keep tabs on that.
That's cameras only, or is that just architecture for like backbone of all traffic?
Well, what they connect to is kind of their issue. It's more, can we give them the transport back? And they were open, like, we looked at our, this is still up there. We looked at our network. I can find the university here. I think they were kind of in here. The airport.
That's the airport there. Around Maple and Niagara Falls Boulevard is what, because they're going to MyoVision, which New York State DOT is.
Here we go.
MyoVision's like a camera.
So it was the Maple corridor up by the North Campus, up in
the upper right from where you are now. A little farther northeast there.
In here?
That's where all those buildings there.
Yeah.
By the lake.
On the Amherst
side. Anyways, they mapped out several dozen poles, and that either they would then just connect to the backbone and they would figure out how to wire up all the poles, or if it made sense, if our contractors are out there building anyways and we're working with grid for pole access and all that, if we can give them a reasonable price to build that out and connect it for them, then they're open to that idea as well. And the study would flush that out. That's it on the new subscriber side of things. And unless there's questions for me, that's what I had to talk about today.
All right, thanks, Matt. So no committees met this month. Obviously the election committee is relative to the audit finance committee, the governance committee. So no committees met this month. There's no unfinished business. And so the next step is we'll dive right into 4 resolutions rather quickly. So first we have the housing services. So I'll read the resolution. All right. So Resolution 2201, a resolution of ErieNet Local Development Corporation authorizing the chairperson of the corporation to enter into a contract with Lumsden McCormick for accounting services. Motion. Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Same. Resolution 2202, a resolution of ErieNet Local Development Corporation authorizing the chairperson of the corporation to enter into a contract with Harris Beach for legal services. Fine. Second. Please. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Resolution 2203, a resolution of ErieNet Local Development Corporation authorizing the chairperson of the corporation to enter into a contract with Wall Insurance for general liability insurance. Motion. Second. All in favor? Aye. And lastly, Resolution 2204, a resolution of the ErieNet Local Development Corporation authorizing the chairperson of the corporation to enter into a contract for banking services. Motion. Second. Carried. Aye. There is nothing else. Now, motion to adjourn. Second. Third. Fourth.